The Horde had exhausted the natural resources of Draenor. By forcing the orcs into a period of prolonged isolation, Sargeras cultivated their desperation until they were ready to conquer another world to secure their future. All that was needed was a vessel, someone who could bridge Draenor and Azeroth together. That person would be none other than the last Guardian, Medivh. If this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome. My name is Llane, and I'm in the middle of abridging the World of Warcraft Chronicle series. That means I'm taking what's in the books and condensing it even a little bit more than it already is. I'm not adding the finer details to each event within the lore, just sticking to the books. Currently, we're on Volume 2. But if you want to start from the beginning, then I suggest clicking the link in the tab up above or in the description down below. That will lead you to a video that contains all 10 episodes covering the lore in Volume 1. But if you're already caught up with the story, then let's continue our journey into the Tales of Azeroth. Some of this may sound familiar to you at first. We've talked a bit about it back in Volume 1, but we can treat this as a refresher. So, the corruption of Medivh was rooted in events occurring millennia before his birth, centered on the Council of Tirisfal. This secretive order of magi protected Azeroth from the Burning Legion by channeling their collective power into a single individual known as the Guardian. The fallen titan Sargeras, seeking a way to infiltrate the world, set his sights on the Guardian Aegwynn. Recognizing her pride and immense magical talent, Sargeras orchestrated a confrontation in the icy wastes of Northrend by sending a physical avatar of his power through a temporary gateway. During the battle in Northrend, Aegwynn successfully defeated the avatar of Sargeras, but the victory was a trap. As she expended her strength to vanquish the vessel, the Legion Lord transferred a portion of his spirit into her soul. While Aegwynn's will was too strong for total corruption, Sargeras subtly influenced her mind, fostering a deep distrust of her peers. This led to a fractured relationship with the Council of Tirisfal, as Aegwynn began to resent their political meddling in human kingdoms and eventually refused to relinquish her guardian powers to a successor. To rein in the defiant Guardian, the Council formed the Tirisguard, a group of mage hunters tasked with apprehending her. Among them was Nielas Aran, who, sharing Aegwynn's distaste for the Council's schemes, chose to become her confidant rather than her captor. Meanwhile, Aegwynn sought a secure location to entomb the remains of the avatar she had defeated. She chose a sunken Night Elven temple protected by ancient seals that negated fell energy, reinforcing it with her own magic to create what would be known as the Tomb of Sargeras. Aegwynn eventually decided to have a child with Nielas Aran, intending to pass her powers to an heir who would be free from the Council's influence. However, she was unaware that the spirit of Sargeras had moved from her own soul into her son, Medivh, while he was still in the womb. After his birth, Aegwynn, exhausted by centuries of service, retreated into isolation. Medivh grew up in the kingdom of Stormwind, developing close friendships with Prince Wrynn and Anduin Lothar, while being tutored in the arcane by his father, the court conjurer. The latent darkness within Medivh remained hidden until the eve of his 14th birthday. As his immense guardian powers suddenly awakened, the resulting magical surge was so violent that it accidentally killed his father, Nielas Aran. The physical and emotional trauma of the event, coupled with the internal struggle against the spirit of Sargeras, plunged the young mage into a deep coma that would last for many years. While Medivh remained in a prolonged coma, the world of Azeroth experienced a period of relative prosperity and internal friction among its various races. In the Eastern Kingdoms, humans maintained a robust trade network with dwarves, gnomes, and high elves, while leading nations like Lordaeron and Dalaran focused on regional mediation and arcane advancement. However, ancient animosities persisted, particularly in Quel'Thalas, where the High Elves were constantly forced to defend their borders against encroaching Amani trolls. Across the sea in Kalimdor, the Night Elves remained vigilant for a cosmic return of the Burning Legion, never suspecting that the true threat would eventually manifest as a mortal race from a dying world, facilitated by the very Guardian meant to protect them. After nearly a decade, Medivh finally awoke and reunited with his childhood friends, Llane Wrynn, the heir to the throne of Stormwind, and the decorated military commander, Anduin Lothar. His return coincided with rising tensions in the south, as Stormwind's territorial expansion towards Stranglethorn Vale sparked a violent conflict with the Gurubashi trolls. While King Bareth and Wrynn favored a purely defensive stance to avoid a full-scale war, his son Llane pushed for aggressive, retaliatory strikes to break the trolls' resolve, leading to heated private debates between the two royals regarding the kingdom's military strategy. During this time, Medivh struggled to process the guilt of his father's death and was increasingly tormented by surreal, conflicting visions. He was frequently visited in his dreams by a mysterious woman urging him to travel to the Tower of Karazhan, while simultaneously feeling a darker, more malignant presence lurking within the recesses of his own mind. Despite these psychic disturbances and the feeling that his thoughts were being twisted, Medivh chose to suppress his growing unease. Seeking a sense of normalcy and peace, he ignored the omens and dedicated himself to supporting Llane and Lothar in their escalating struggle against the Gurubashi. The conflict with the trolls reached a boiling point as Medivh used his awakening powers to aid the human forces. While his friends saw his recovery as a blessing for the kingdom's defense, the underlying corruption planted by Sargeras continued to fester in the shadows of his soul. Medivh's desire to be a loyal friend and a protector of Stormwind acted as a temporary shield against his darker impulses, but the internal battle for his sanity was only beginning. The geopolitical landscape of Azeroth remained blissfully unaware that the stability enforced by kingdoms like Lordaeron was a fragile mask, hiding the fact that their greatest defender was becoming their greatest liability. Ultimately, the period of relative peace served as the quiet before a massive transition in Azerthorian history. The various powers of the world, from the Druids in the Emerald Dream to the kings of the Eastern Kingdoms, were focused on traditional rivals and ancestral duties, leaving them blind to the unconventional invasion Medivh would eventually orchestrate. As Medivh integrated himself back into the society of Stormwind and its military efforts, the pieces were unknowingly being set for the opening of the Dark Portal, an event that would forever end the era of simple tribal squabbles and regional trade. Before we continue, I'd like to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And if you ever feel like supporting the work that I do here, you can check out my membership options here on YouTube or over on Patreon. I really do appreciate the support from everyone who has already done so. I'm not really in a position to offer much in return, but what I do offer is early access to the videos when I publish them. But now, having said that, let's get back to our story. Despite King Barathin's defensive strategy, a Gurubashi raiding party managed to bypass patrol lines and devastate Westfall, burning 3 towns and brutally murdering dozens of citizens. This atrocity sparked a political crisis in Stormwind, where the king maintained his stance on de-escalation by only bolstering defensive patrols. Prince Llane Wrynn publicly challenged his father's perceived cowardice, leading to a humiliating rebuke in the royal court. Undeterred and supported by Anduin Lothar, Llane decided to launch a secret, unauthorized mission into the heart of Stranglethorn Vale to decapitate the troll leadership, believing their close ties to the king would protect them from the consequences of insubordination. Llane and Lothar recognized that a successful strike against the trolls required more than conventional military force, so they turned to Medivh. Though the public knew him only as a powerful mage, Medivh had shared the secret of his guardian heritage and the Council of Tirisfal with his friends. They leveraged this destiny to pressure him into joining the mission, questioning his commitment to protecting the land. While Medivh was initially hesitant due to his lack of combat experience and the trauma of his father's death, he ultimately agreed, driven by a hidden, growing hunger to test the true limits of his vast guardian powers in a real battle. Under the cover of Medivh's cloaking magic, the trio infiltrated the jungle to assassinate the Gurubashi warlord Gul'dan at his ziggurat. The mission spiraled into a desperate struggle for survival when they discovered the trolls were wielding forbidden blood magic derived from the ancient god Akar the Soul Flayer. During a fierce battle that nearly overwhelmed him, Medivh was forced to abandon all restraint and unleash his full, raw power. The resulting magical explosion was so catastrophic that it annihilated every troll within the ziggurat, sending echoes of their dying screams throughout the darkest reaches of the jungle. The aftermath of the battle left Llane and Lothar deeply unsettled, as the victory was overshadowed by the sheer horror of Medivh's capabilities. For the first time, they glimpsed a dark side to their friend that they could neither comprehend nor relate to, replacing their joy with a newfound sense of dread. Even Medivh was profoundly disturbed by the event. He realized he had cast a spell he had never been taught, and he could not determine the source of the knowledge or whether the energy he had summoned was purely arcane in nature. This secret excursion effectively silenced the Gurubashi threat for the time being, but it fundamentally altered the bond between the three friends. While the Kingdom of Stormwind remained unaware of the illicit mission, the Shadow of Sargeras had used the conflict to further entrench his influence over the Guardian's soul. Medivh's successful, yet terrifying display of power served as a precursor to his future descent into madness, proving that the very magic meant to safeguard Azeroth could be twisted into a tool of absolute destruction. The death of warlord Gul'dan did not go unavenged, as the Gurubashi trolls quickly united under their son Xanon to march on Stormwind. The humans were completely unprepared for the sheer scale of the troll fury, which hadn't been seen in such a unified force for centuries. Within days, the kingdom's southern defenses were obliterated, and the Gurubashi began a brutal campaign toward the capital, butchering civilians and taking gruesome trophies along the way. King Barothin was forced to recall all his forces to the gates of Stormwind City, preparing for a final, colossal stand as the kingdom's survival hung in the balance. As the siege began, Wrynn confessed the secret mission to his father, who met the news with deep disappointment rather than anger, realizing the trolls would likely provide the punishment themselves. The battle at the walls was horrific, especially as Xanon unleashed mutated berserkers imbued with forbidden blood magic that tore through the human defenders. In a desperate attempt to break the siege, King Barothin led a daring counterattack with his personal guard to slay the troll leader. Though he fought valiantly, the odds were insurmountable, and the elderly king was killed on the field of battle. Following his father's death, a guilt-ridden Llane took command of the disorganized forces and pleaded with Medivh to unleash the same devastating power he had shown in the jungle. Medivh, though terrified of his own potential, felt a dark excitement at the prospect of using his full might. Despite the isolationist history of Stormwind, which had made Barothin hesitant to seek aid from northern human nations like Lordaeron after they were ignored during the past Null attacks, Medivh became the city's sole hope. He took to the ramparts and began a catastrophic arcane barrage, incinerating and freezing the Gurubashi in a display of pure magical violence. The power Medivh wielded was absolute, but it came with a sickening realization. He was intentionally making the troll's deaths as excruciating as possible, and he was horrified to find that he enjoyed the sensation. By the time his spell work ceased, Zanan and the vast majority of the Gurubashi army had been wiped out, leaving only a few survivors to flee the magical maelstrom. While the city was saved, the victory was hollow for the three friends. As they knew their own recklessness and Stranglethorn had invited this tragedy upon their people, in the aftermath, the public hailed Medivh as a hero and welcomed the coronation of King Llane Wrynn and Anduin Lothar rising to a top military command. However, Medivh was haunted by the knowledge that he lacked the mental fortitude to control the guardian powers within him. Driven by the fear of what he might do if left unchecked, he finally decided to follow the mysterious woman in his dreams to Karazhan. He hoped that by traveling to the ancient tower, he could finally learn to refine and master the volatile energy that threatened to consume his soul. Upon Medivh's arrival at the Tower of Karazhan, he finally met his mother Aegwynn, who was incensed by his delay and the resulting near destruction of Stormwind. Over the following year, she mentored him on the heavy burden of the Guardian, emphasizing a life of absolute secrecy and isolation. Aegwynn specifically warned him to distrust the Council of Tirisfal, whom she viewed as a self-serving organization that had drifted from its original purpose of protecting Azeroth. She explained that the Council would likely view him with suspicion, as he was the first Guardian to inherit power through blood rather than their direct appointment. During their time together, Medivh confessed his fears regarding a strange darkness dwelling within his soul, but Aegwynn mistakenly dismissed these concerns as the natural weight of great responsibility. She did not realize that this was actually the lingering spirit of Sargeras twisting her son's mind, just as it had once subtly influenced her own. To protect Medivh from further council interference, Aegwynn eventually returned to her exile, leaving him in the care of her trusted friend Moros, who served as the tower's caretaker while Medivh immersed himself in the vast libraries of Karazhan to master his abilities. As Aegwynn predicted, the Council of Tirisfal eventually tracked Medivh to the tower after hearing of his exploits in Stormwind. Having learned from their failed attempts to control Aegwynn, the Council opted for a subtler approach, attempting to place spies within the tower by sending young magi to act as his apprentices. Medivh, however, proved to be an incredibly difficult and demanding mentor. He dismissed students for the slightest errors, and most lasted less than a week. This cycle of isolation only caused the internal darkness to grow, prompting Moros to suggest a change in strategy to improve the Guardian's deteriorating mood. To combat his loneliness, Medivh began hosting extravagant banquets and galas for the nobility of the surrounding regions, turning Karazhan into a hub for high society events. These parties thoroughly confused the Council of Tirisfal's spies, who reported that the son of the legendary Aegwynn appeared to be living a shallow life of luxury rather than fulfilling his cosmic duties. This public persona served as a convenient mask, as the Council began to underestimate him, believing he was simply a pampered aristocrat with no interest in the ancient struggle against the Legion. Despite the influx of social activity and the presence of high society guests, the distraction was only superficial. Beneath the veneer of the enchanted feasts and the rigorous training of his few remaining apprentices, the corruption of Sargeras reached its zenith. Medivh was no longer truly alone in the physical sense, but the demonic presence within him had finally succeeded in engulfing every corner of his soul. The Guardian of Azeroth had been fully compromised, setting the stage for the dark turn his power would soon take against the world he was born to protect. Between his high society galas, Medivh became obsessed with studying demonic lore and the history of the War of the Ancients, leading him to a dark realization. He viewed the ancient unification of Azeroth's races against the Burning Legion as a peak that the world could never reach again. In his eyes, modern Azeroth had devolved into a collection of bickering nations and petty tribes, such as the humans and trolls, who wasted their strength on meaningless wars. This perceived weakness convinced Medivh that if the Legion were to return, the world's fractured state would ensure its total destruction, as no one seemed to remember that the demons were only temporarily defeated, not destroyed. Guided by the subtle, despairing influence of Sargeras, Medivh reached the radical conclusion that Azeroth was fundamentally flawed and would never change on its own. He decided that the only way to save the world was to break it entirely, destroying the nations, cultures, and kings that created such division. He believed that Azeroth required a firm hand to impose a new order, and as the Guardian, he felt uniquely entitled to be that force. To accomplish this massive undertaking, he realized he could not act alone. He needed a powerful, external army to serve as his instrument of change. Using his vast powers, Medivh began venturing into the cosmos and the twisting nether, searching for both signs of the Legion and a potential tool for his mission. Under the quiet direction of Sargeras, his attention was drawn to the world of Draenor. Taking the form of a raven, he spent years observing the inhabitants of this dying world, the Orcs. He watched their fearsome martial prowess and their systematic destruction of the Draenei under the Legion's influence. He noted that once the Legion had finished using them, they were discarded, leaving the Orcs desperate as their world withered under the corrupting effects of fell power. Medivh saw the Horde as the perfect weapon, a race already proven to be easily manipulated by the Burning Legion. He calculated that he could seize control of them, just as the demons had, using them to invade and transform Azeroth forever. There was a twisted sense of irony in his plan that he found particularly delightful. He would use the Legion's own former puppets to save Azeroth from the Legion's future return. During this period of planning and discovery, he meticulously documented his forbidden magical techniques and cosmic findings into a singular, powerful volume that would be remembered as the Book of Medivh. Ultimately, Medivh's descent into madness was framed by a warped sense of duty. He believed that by inviting a violent alien invasion, he was performing the ultimate act of guardianship. He saw the destruction of the status quo as a necessary reset for a world he deemed too weak to survive otherwise. In his isolation at Karazhan, the Guardian of Azeroth had fully transitioned from a protector into a conqueror, blinded by a shadow that had once brought a Titan to the same conclusion, that the only way to preserve existence was to unmake it. As the Horde teetered on the edge of self-destruction, Gul'dan faced increasing pressure from Blackhand, who was prepared to kill the warlock if a solution for their dying world was not found. Before this could happen, Medivh intervened, appearing to the Shadow Council as a mysterious hooded stranger. When Gul'dan attempted to strike him down with fell magic, Medivh easily turned the warlock's own power against him, inflicting a humiliating and painful defeat in front of his subordinates. This display of dominance deeply wounded Gul'dan's pride, creating a lasting resentment toward the stranger, though the orc was forced to acknowledge the visitor's overwhelming strength. Medivh presented the orcs with a way to escape Draenor by building a massive magical gateway to a bountiful new world called Azeroth. To entice the Shadow Council, he projected glorious visions of pristine rivers and lush grasslands into their minds, promising a realm ripe for conquest. Gul'dan, sensing a demonic essence within the stranger, incorrectly assumed Medivh was a direct messenger from Sargeras, sent to replace the absent Kil'jaeden. While Medivh believed he was outsmarting the Burning Legion by using their puppets to save his world through a forced evolution, he was unknowingly fulfilling the Legion's ultimate goal of bringing doom to Azeroth. Despite the desperate state of the orcs, Gul'dan refused to cooperate without a personal guarantee of power. In response, Medivh tempted him with a vision of the tomb of Sargeras, ancient underwater ruins containing extraordinary power. Medivh felt safe sharing this secret because the tomb was buried at the bottom of the sea and protected by Aegwynn's powerful guardian seals, which he believed the warlock could never bypass. He promised that if the Horde successfully conquered Azeroth, he would reveal the tomb's exact location and grant Gul'dan the power hidden within, a bargain the warlock felt compelled to accept. With the deal struck, Gul'dan convinced Blackhand that a new world awaited their battle lust, provided they could bridge the gap between dimensions. He identified a convergence of magical ley lines on the eastern edge of the Hellfire Peninsula as the ideal site for the gateway. Under the command of Blackhand and the guidance of the Shadow Council, the orcs began the grueling labor of constructing a massive, enchanted stone frame. This structure, designed to stabilize the volatile magical rift between Draenor and Azeroth, would eventually be known as the Dark Portal. The construction of the portal marked the final stage of Medivh's descent into betrayal, as he prepared to tear a hole in the fabric of reality. While the orcs saw a chance for survival and the warlock saw a path to godhood, the Guardians saw a necessary fire that would burn away the old world's weaknesses. None of them truly grasped that they were all pieces on a board controlled by the spirit of the fallen titan dwelling within Medivh's soul. The stone frame in the desert was not just a door for an army. It was the physical manifestation of a corruption that had started thousands of years prior with Aegwynn and the Council of Tirisfal. As Medivh made secret trips to Draenor to oversee the Dark Portal, his frequent absences from Karazhan began to raise red flags. While the local nobility merely grumbled about their host missing his own lavish galas, the Council of Tirisfal grew deeply suspicious. They had previously written Medivh off as an immature socialite, a preferable alternative to his rebellious mother, Aegwynn, but they now realized his lifestyle of luxury was likely a calculated front. To uncover his true intentions, the Council tasked the Kirin Tor with infiltrating the tower, using disguised guests and magical breaches to spy on his private libraries. Medivh easily thwarted these espionage attempts, but he realized the Council's persistence posed a direct threat to his plan to save Azeroth. To end their meddling, he orchestrated the cold-blooded assassination of 4 council members in a single week. By appearing at his high society parties every night during the murders and ensuring no arcane magic was used in the killings, he provided himself with a perfect alibi. The surviving Magi, unable to fathom that a Guardian would resort to such barbarity and lacking any physical evidence of his involvement, were left baffled and terrified by the sudden slaughter of their peers. Paralyzed by the belief that an unknown assassin was hunting them, the remaining members of the Council of Tirisfal abandoned their surveillance of Karazhan to focus on their own survival. This masterfully executed distraction removed the final layer of oversight standing in Medivh's way. With his domestic rivals looking for a phantom killer, the Guardian was finally free to finalize his pact with Gul'dan. The stage was now set for the opening of the Dark Portal, as the Protector of Azeroth had successfully traded the lives of his fellow sorcerers for the unchecked freedom to invite an alien invasion. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, please check out my YouTube, Patreon, or Twitch memberships. And a big shout out to all the names on the screen here. You mean so much to me. Thank you so much for your help. And with that, I'll see you guys next time on the Tales of Azeroth.